Hey, yeah.
Did you just say that? Finally, finally,
Podcast
after
is a go. Podcast is a go. Kyle, I'm so excited.
after all these years,
After all these
all
years.
all these years of working on our content, working on working on our
Dude,
speaking
it's
presence.
been, do you realize it's been like 8 years, bro? Or 9 years? Because it's 25. We,
2025.
we
Yeah,
shut down in
you know,
2008. We shut down the gyms in 2018. I think we stopped podcasts, what, like 2017?
no. It would have been Candy and I came back to Austin 2014 or 2015. So I think it would have been 10 or
Really?
11 years. Yeah. Yep.
Jeez, man, time flies.
I know, and I can guarantee you that you look a lot older than our last podcast, and I look about this. I look about the same.
Your nose is bigger, though.
Man, well, I think it's the light. I do think that that's nice fluorescent lighting here. It really brings out my features. Like the nose shadow is intense right there. It's like it goes for days
Looks
down
like
into that.
the bulb on your nose has gotten bigger.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for that. So that's going to really make me feel good about this. How come your glasses aren't shiny? I feel like I put mine on and it's just always shiny reflection. That's not too bad, is it? I don't know that I need them for this though. But anyway, so here we are, the
Yeah,
long awaited
yeah.
conversation to start recording our conversations instead of just letting them travel off into the space where you realize the aliens are going to pick up on those sound waves of our phone call, then they're definitely not going to come invade Earth because they think that
Yeah,
if anybody
yeah,
else
yeah.
if anybody else is having conversations like us down here, there's nothing for them to worry about.
Nope.
Nope. All right, so we talked a little bit about stuff to talk about today. Do you want to talk about? So I did a little literature review on the icing that you mentioned. I don't know if you want to go over that or not.
We can. I mean,
I mean, I can
I
keep it
mean,
pretty short. I don't know that
yeah.
you're going to like it, but
Well, let me start by saying, I mean, you know how I feel about research, you know? I mean, me and my dad actually were talking about it yesterday or the day before. We are talking about research on sugar versus sweet, like non-sugar alternatives.
yeah,
And there's research that shows, you know, both ways. I mean, I don't know anymore what to believe.
you
Unless
know,
I
I
do, unless I do like N of one study on myself and my kids. Like I don't, I don't know what to believe anymore.
sometimes I think, like in talking to people about research, not everyone really understands how research or like the scientific method. They don't really understand how it's set up and what it does. And you and I've talked about this. I know you do understand it. But like, research or the scientific method, it doesn't set out to prove anything. It sets out to disprove the null hypothesis. So what we'd want to come up, like talking about the icing, let's say there was a very simple research question of like, does icing aid recovery? What we would set up a research question and we'd come up with a null hypothesis. And hypothesis would say like, if we believe that icing does speed up recovery, then the regular hypothesis would be icing speeds up recovery. The null hypothesis is just the opposite of that. Icing does not speed up recovery. And whenever you're doing research, you're actually trying to disprove that null. So what
Right.
we would say is that we disprove that it did not speed up recovery, but then that's just a probability. So then, like, well, there's a chance that if it's not speeding it up, which would be slowing it down, then there's a chance that it might be speeding it up. But then it's just a percentage. Maybe we have the confidence interval, and so maybe it's like an 80% chance that it might actually benefit recovery. But anyway, looking at research that way, it doesn't prove anything. So if we see scientific articles or whatever, and we'll see this in the media where it says research shows or research proves. Research doesn't ever prove. It disproves the opposite. So sometimes I think framing it that way might help understand really the idea of research. And I think to your point too, is there in a research study, right, you have to control a lot of variable. And then so that sometimes impacts your generalizability. So if I'm doing it in a lab under these conditions, well, you're right. It might be totally different whenever we go out into the field and we're using this on athletes or we're doing this with a particular whatever. So that's always a part of it too.
Yeah, yeah. I think also too is we've got to look at biased funding, you know? I think that's a big one too, right? Is like nowadays with, I mean, I mean, I guess AI wouldn't be, but I'm just thinking of like in terms of what are we trying to disprove and who's trying to disprove it, right? I think
Yeah.
it has a lot to do with that too, is like a lot of times there's such bias funding and bias researchers that are trying to disprove something to benefit in some way, shape, or form, right?
And that's definitely, I mean, we don't really have to get into too many current events, but there's a big thing going on right now with Tylenol. And I think that, to your point, like yes, big pharma might be behind that. Whoever owns Tylenol probably has endless funds, so they're going to probably try to do something um to, like you're saying, still one
Yeah.
thing, one specific thing over the other. And also how people work, you can do research ethically, but then you can word the finding in such a way where it kind of confuses people or maybe just doesn't let them see the truth. I think whenever it comes to like icing or something like that, it's a lower skill. I don't know that there would be, a lot of big
Well,
industries behind it, but there could be product companies. And I know this, from working at a product company
yeah.
where it's like, hey, we don't have a bunch of money to give you, but here's some cool stuff, here's this or that to do the study. And then kind of like inherently the researcher might want to be like, okay, I want it to be positive for this company. So there could be a bias there, not a major bias, but it could be enough to kind of change things one
Well,
way or the
and
other.
you look at too, what would be the ultimate benefit of doctors, physical therapists, um, sports therapists, whatever, with saying that icing does speed up recovery? What would be the benefits, right? I mean, think about it.
I mean, yeah, I do think we have to somehow believe more often than not that most people are good. I think if we believe everybody's out there trying to screw us, like that's no place, no world to live in. So I would
Yeah, but
generally think most physical therapists want to help. Are there bad ones or good ones? Sure. But
well, maybe not the physical therapists themselves, but the organizations that are backing them, and then also I mean, look who runs all that. I mean, if you look at Big Farm, right? I mean,
yeah,
they don't want people to recover fast,
yeah.
But go
And I
ahead.
do think it,
I don't
but
want to
as
get
you're
down.
saying this, stop interrupting me.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
As you're thinking this, I am thinking of something else where it is an industry where I think, hey, all these people want to help. Then you see, well, wait, they work for for-profit businesses, so they do generally want to help, but it's like they got to get people into the clinic. So
Yeah.
then, sometimes things are kind of skewed a bit to get people into the clinic. So you do
Well,
that point. Go
and you
ahead.
look at too, like ground level, right? The guys and the gals that are trying to help. I'm not saying that they're bad people or not good
Yeah,
therapists,
yeah,
right? I'm talking about the people doing or funding the actual research, not the people in the actual research lab, but the people that are funding the research. If we don't want people to heal, and we want people to continue to buy our medications or continue to use our services or whatever it is. That's and I think that is the world that we live in. You know, I know we talk about this all the time. As we get older, we become more and more conspiracy theorists. You know,
You
think
especially, yeah.
yeah, 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 I do. And I'll admit that. But I'm seeing more and more bad, when it comes to this kind of stuff, that it's just so hard, like, to really trust anything that you don't do, like, on, other than the things that you do on yourself, right? Like the researches with the medications, the ivermectins, the all that. Oh, we probably shouldn't say that. That's
Oh,
probably we're gonna
the
get
FBI
defunded.
is going to show up at your house.
um, but you look at all this stuff, and it's like, well, it worked for me, and it
Yeah,
continues to work for me and my family. I
yeah,
mean, but yeah, I could go down a big rabbit hole with the ivermectin thing.
yeah.
But um,
You're going
yeah,
to get in
go
trouble.
ahead and give me
A
the
little
bad
overview.
news.
Well, it's not bad news. You're largely right. So the question is, does icing aid or speed up or assist recovery in any way after an acute soft tissue injury, right? So if somebody has a sprain or a strain, should we ice? And I reviewed, I think it's probably about 60 studies from late 90s, and icing has been going on for a long time. Research on icing has been going uh, under undergoing has been underway. There's been a lot of it in the past several decades, and it's really inconclusive on long-term icing and like long duration icing, and does that speed up recovery or not. And one of the arguments that you had, which is correct, is icing for too long would kind of be the key there. It slows down activity in like cellular regeneration, and so it might actually impede the tissue's healing. However, that appears to be if you're icing for longer than about 10 minutes. And I didn't really see anything like if you're doing longer than 10 minutes, 8 times a day or whatever, I didn't see anything there. It's just more a single set type of a duration. But the research is pretty supportive for icing for acute soft tissue injuries if it's short durations being under 10 minutes. And the reason for that primarily is pain management. So I think oftentimes what we think is, well, you put ice on something and that's immediately going to slow down circulation, and it's not what we want to do to for injury recovery. It cools down the tissues, right? That's not going to help activity because that slows down activity. However, it takes time to do that, right? So we're applying ice to the surface of the skin, and the muscles and everything are underneath that. So it takes a while for that cold to penetrate down into the tissue and actually disrupt healing. So in the short term, ice on the skin is beneficial because that interrupts the pain signal. I don't know if you remember if we've ever really talked about the pain gate theory. So you have these certain receptors in the body where they can sense pain, or they can sense other type of stimuli. And oftentimes, if we introduce a different stimuli, then it turns down the volume on pain. And cold seems to be one of those. Cold on the skin immediately turns down the volume on pain, which can be beneficial, but it's short term. Short term, I think. And to your point, depending on the severity of the injury, of course, movement is a key thing. If you really want to improve fluid flow and circulation, well, muscles contracting is how you do that, by moving your body. So we could use ice temporarily to help reduce the pain, but then within that pain reduction, we want to try to introduce movement. There's certain ways you do it, of course. It's like graded exposure. You wouldn't just go right back to running a marathon. You would maybe walk slowly or whatever if it's an ankle sprain, and then you slowly build up. So that's really the collection of the evidence there.
Okay, so so the ultimate goal there is to stop the pain. That's the ultimate goal.
the ultimate goal is to reintroduce movement as early and as safely as possible. And if we can use something to reduce the pain, then we can move sooner. Not anti-inflammatories. Anti-inflammatories seem to impede recovery. They don't speed it up because it's influencing the inflammation too much. And inflammation is what's bringing all the nutrients to the tissue to repair it.
Yeah, and see,
Yeah.
that's my biggest problem with icing is that inflammation is our friend in that case,
Yeah.
right? So in these situations, let's take a situation where, you know, a kid's hurting, um, and he gets a kid got injured, he has some swelling, and we introduce the ice. Okay, the pain stops. However, it restricts the blood flow. So that's obviously not what we want to do. The inflammation is our friend. We want the inflammation there because that's what brings the oxygenated blood to the tissue. Um, and I, when you're talking about it's only going, a certain depth as far as the ice is only the cooling is only going a certain depth. How do we know that? How do we know
Well,
that?
I guess that it's back to questions of knowing stuff from research. I don't know that specific thing. My guess would be looking at studies if they ever did a tissue biopsy or try to measure the temperature of
Yeah,
the temperature of the tissue at depth. I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know if anyone's ever done that before.
The,
But what
the, the only reason,
we should agree though that if the surface of the skin, the temperature is around 98 degrees, like that's not near the temperature of ice. So
yeah,
it's going to take some time to not only you reduce the temperature of the skin, but especially the tissues underneath it. So
yeah.
is that good question? Maybe I can try to see how they did some of that. But short
I'm
term
just
icing seems
the
to be
only
beneficial.
reason I the only reason I ask that is because obviously people aren't, and I'm not saying like you ice for 10 minutes. Yeah, to me, like pain, it's very, I guess, objective, right? Um,
Subjective.
huh?
Subjective.
Subjective.
Right?
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You did?
subjective,
Okay.
not objective. Subjective. Yeah, that's what I said. Um, so
Possibly. I don't know. My ears.
yeah, we'll go with subjective.
Okay.
It, to me, like everybody is different with pain, right? I mean, you have
Oh,
some
yeah.
people that whatever. Everybody's different with pain. Um, to me, the ultimate goal with especially like extreme athletes or kids that are wanting to get back as soon as possible, the ultimate goal is getting them back as soon as possible. So the pain to me is not even a factor when it comes to recovery. And I say that meaning that it's not a factor. Like if let's say I get injured, right? If I get injured, I'm gonna start moving immediately. I'm not gonna worry about the pain. Like obviously, if it's a torn muscle or something, that's a little different, right? That's extreme tissue damage. Um, but if we know that it's not that, we know that it's not extreme. We know there's no broken bone, there's no torn tissue. It's just inflammation. I'm going to get moving as soon as possible. So I want to do everything I can to influence the recovery. So the last thing that I would do is put ice on it because let's go back to we learned this in college was like the whole reason for icing in the first place was exactly what you're saying, to stop pain or to stop somebody from bleeding out. Like they will apply ice if you're bleeding out, right? Um, but we have learned too that it does reverse the lymphatic flow if you keep it on there long enough. And all these kids, they're not icing for 10 minutes. They're icing for 30 minutes, right? That's the typical rice method was 30 minutes of ice and then you take it off and then you put it back on again. And so my point has always been, okay, we don't need ice for anything. Like the ice is only to stop pain. That's really the only thing that we can definitely say. That of course ice stops pain because it numbs the tissue, right? But if we look at how our body was built and what it was built to do, it's built to heal that injury, right? So if our body is built to heal that injury, we don't want to reverse the process by putting ice on it. We want to continue with movement and create more blood flow, you know, and
Um,
create let the lymphatic system work, right? Not more blood flow, but
yeah,
well,
yeah.
yeah, more blood flow. Create that
There is
lymphatic system.
there was this acronym, these acronyms that popped up that I think I've heard them before, but the, not enough to really remember what they mean. But we've all heard of RICE, right? Rest,
Yep.
ice,
Yep.
compression, elevation. That
Yep.
changed to oh shoot, what was it? Mice. Remember mice? Movement, ice,
Yep.
compression, elevation. There are some newer ones, and I wrote them down here because I couldn't remember. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so peace and love, and both of these go together, right? So peace, the P is protection. So you want to avoid movements that make it worse, is the way this was defined. So it's not avoiding movement, but it's don't make it worse. And I think that's where pain comes in. Sometimes we don't recognize that, right? Pain is not bad, right? Pain is a sign. So I do want to move, and I want to let pain guide that movement, right? I don't go into pain much more. I just try to move, within whatever the parameters are that I can without making causing more pain. So to your point, that's a reason not to ice or not to try to take an analgesic or anything that's going to influence pain. Is I use pain to guide my movement. But then there's elevation. So we have a protection, elevation, avoid anti-inflammatories. So that would be avoiding taking something orally, but I interpret that too in avoiding long-term exposure to cold or ice because that's an anti-inflammatory response. Compression, so to limit swelling. So I think that is a better means of limiting the swelling is some light compression. Education is the E, so empower the patient with information, and realistic expectation. But then right after that, so that's the first few days after an injury is peace. After that, it moves to love. We want to load, so gradual progressive loading to stimulate repair and restorative functions. Optimism, so this starts to get into much more of a psychosocial approach too, uh, using positive language, vascularization, so introducing pain-free exercise to help promote blood flow and healing. And then after that, you start to get more. The last E is exercise, but that's like tailored rehabilitation to restore mobility. So I really like that one because that's all about smart loading and movements, avoiding the anti-inflammatories. We can use a little bit of compression. I think elevation being well is still pretty effective.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you what you thought about the elevation. I wonder, were we better at healing injuries in the caveman days?
Uh, how would we know? You just asked me this about the tissue temperature. How do we know? How do you know? How do we know?
I,
Research doesn't prove it. Here's what I would think is people that were better at managing and mitigating their injuries and pain and restoring, those are the only ones that survived. Like the ones that were babies about it and laid around and rested, they were eaten. So
well, and
we come from a long line of survivors.
that's 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 why I ask it, because the elevation thing to me, like that's resting, right? And wait. So
Well, I
we
mean,
hear
when you
this a
say
lot.
that though, it's not like you don't rest at all. Like, yeah, if you have an ankle sprain, you need to back off of activity a little bit, right? You can't
Yeah,
make
yeah,
it
yeah,
worse. So,
yeah.
and I see elevation too as aiding lymphatic flow, especially for the lower extremities. There's the only way that the heart is the only pump that we have, and it ejects, blood and fluids out forcefully. But then to get stuff back up the body, it takes muscular contraction. And getting some of that elevation that would aid in lymphatic flow, especially for the lower extremities. I would just say, thank you, Dr. Stull.
Uh, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. Because obviously, I mean, we have to rest no matter what. I mean, we have micro injuries every single day, and we have to sleep, right? I mean, sleep is part of it. But I wonder, because I hear a lot of this crap about, go elevate your ankle and put ice on it. Like you hear that all the time, and that doesn't work. It doesn't help. It doesn't speed up the process at all. It slows down the process. Um,
I'll,
I know that, huh?
just saying again, it depends, right? It's individualized and it's dependent. So short-term ice doesn't appear to slow it down. But I'm saying again, like you said, with research doesn't apply to everybody. Everybody's different. But if you, we have to somehow lean into evidence-based practices, right? So that it provides a framework at least. And according to the studies, short-term ice does appear to help. Short term, elevating for 30 minutes and icing for 30 minutes. Absolutely agree with you. Nope, that's not going to help. Might actually make things worse. But short term appears to help. I agree with your stuff about pain too. And that thing we just read right there, peace and love, doesn't say anything about icing. I'm just saying the literature review shows that short term seems to be okay. All right. All right. Good. So there we
Next
go.
topic. Next topic.
Maybe a
I
takeaway
disagree
takeaway
with
from
the
that though.
research.
Takeaway from that, I think, would be though to the point is work within parameters of pain limits. Don't make it worse. You don't necessarily need to try to reduce the pain, but don't make it worse. Move as much as you can without making pain worse. Some resting and elevation while you're resting appears to be beneficial for lymphatic flow, and then you just want to gradually start to reintroduce movement, and that
So
helps
let me
those
ask you.
tissues become more functional too.
So you're talking about short-term icing. I get that, but let me ask you this. So if we're numbing pain, aren't we sending signals that, well, this isn't hurt, this isn't injured?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we probably all know from icing is where, icing is not like a numbing shot to where we can't feel it. We do still feel it. So I wouldn't say numbing per se. I would say, or the way I describe it is it's just turning down the volume on pain. We still have the pain, but we're just reducing the loudness of it. And
Well, if
so
you take
that might get us a little bit more movement because we're not feeling the pain as much.
well, but that may be a bad thing, though, right?
It might, yeah, yeah. If it's
I
completely
mean, if
numb,
it's giving you more moving. Well, think about this too. Even if you ice for 10 minutes and you touch the skin, it's numb, right?
cold, yeah,
Some of those nerves that are coming in from the muscle tissue that's going, skin level, I mean, it
yeah,
is numbing.
yeah. You just need to change your Facebook profile to anti-icer.
Anti-ice. I don't think that would be, I don't know if that would be, well,
They
yeah, I
shouldn't.
don't think that would
Not
be a
be,
good
yeah,
thing right
that's right.
now.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, don't do that. Especially being in the Dallas area.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. All
All
right.
right,
Well, there we
next
go.
topic.
I think that was a good topic. Thanks for um, suggesting that.
You're welcome, doctor. Um, all right, let's move on to baseball mentality.
Okay. Yeah. Baseball mentality. Love it.
um, so I'll give a brief synopsis of what I've seen this season. Um, based on our clinic. Are you having problems?
I'm just curious the length of time we have been in this meeting. Not that I care. I'm fine, but
It's 11:56. I don't think we got started till 11:30. Huh?
something like that. Maybe a little bit later. All right.
Um,
So we did a little background. We did a little mental performance clinic. How long ago was that? 2 or 3 months ago? Not quite that long.
yeah, I would say 2.5 months ago, roughly,
Yes.
because we played four. Yeah, it was right before our first tournament. So yeah, about 2.5. Um, so obviously with the homework that the kids have been doing, I've been having them do it after practice every time because I want to make sure that they're doing it. And I think it's a good, um, I think it's good for the parents to see that I'm definitely like 100% in, you know, uh, I'm
You're frozen.
100% on board and I want this to happen, right? Is I want these kids to be mentally tough as they get older. Um, and obviously with the sport of baseball, it's one of the toughest things for people to get. And it's
Hang
why,
hang on. Pause for a second. You're frozen, and your voice is starting to get all weird sounding.
I've been using ice.
You what?
I've been using ice.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. All right. Go ahead. Continue. Let's see. I'm going to turn off my camera for a little bit.
Um, where did I stop?
So you're having the players work on doing their homework after practice, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I've been having them do it after practice. Oh, I know where I was going is so, with baseball, as we all know, it's a failure sport. It's a sport of failure, and having to overcome that failure and staying mentally tough is one of the hardest things. And I believe it to be, and obviously I've played multiple sports growing up, um, and it's the hardest. It is definitely the hardest that I've ever encountered as far as the mental toughness aspect of baseball, because there is a lot of downtime to think about what you did wrong. Um, so to continue to uh, ruminate with thoughts in your brain, um, of the positive things is very tough in baseball. It's very tough. So of course, a lot of these kids, these thoughts that are ruminating is constant negativity. So it's trying to reprogram the brain to think of the positive, excuse me, of the positive things. And I have seen multiple players on our team over the past 2 months, um, be able to think positively, to take their breaths, to go up to the plate or go up to the mound, with more what we call swagger, or positivity, I guess you would call it. Um, and it's been amazing to watch. I mean, we have pitchers that couldn't throw more than 2 innings purely based on their mental aspect of the game. It had nothing to do with their performance as far as fatiguing or not being able to do the task. It had to do with their mental aspect of the game, and a lot of these boys, they would fold after let's say one walk, two walks, and they're done, and we'd have to pull them. And now they can walk a kid and go back and strike out a kid or get a kid out. And we've had two in particular that I'm thinking of that were 2 inning pitcher guys. And which is it's tough to run a team with pitchers that can only go 2 innings, and that my son being one of them. Um, when you have a kid that can only throw 2 innings, you're constantly trying to find a new pitcher, and then you got to backfill their position, that they were playing previously, because you're bringing in them the pitch. And then so it's a constant struggle over the years. And we have kids now that are throwing 5, 6 innings because of the fact that they are staying in the game mentally. And it's been, I mean, it's literally been 2 months, bro. Like, that's what's so impressive to me. I thought it was going to take longer than this. And I know we have a long way to go. I'm not saying that, you know, even those guys that are doing better, they can do better, right? I think they can do better going into the next game or whatever. Let's say they pitch 5 innings and we lose a game. This happened. Um, they did a great job pitching. We made some errors. We didn't hit as well as we should have. And then them going to the next game, they may have been a little down. But all in all, just seeing these kids be able to perform, for a full game versus 2 or 3 innings has been just absolutely amazing. I mean, and I didn't think it was going to work this quickly. I really didn't. I thought it was going to take a good 6 months. I thought we were going to see progress like in the spring and in the summer, not right now, but it's happening like now.
Great. Yeah, whenever we talked about that too, I can't remember the exact time frame. Um, but I also thought it would have taken a little bit longer. I don't know if you think of those young minds like that, and especially if they really have a desire to get better, and it's intrinsic, like they want to do it for themselves. Then I could see the brain adapting much quicker under those conditions. Largely just because they're what they're is it 12U? How old are they?
It's
Goodness,
12
12?
use, so some 11,
Okay.
some 12. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, that could be a big part of it, but that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, it's been interesting because you look at, man, I don't want to get down this rabbit hole, but the pressure in club baseball right now, and one of the fastest growing sports in the country, and just the amount of pressure that these kids go through from not only the sport itself, but parents, coaches, organizations, playing tournaments almost every weekend. Like, there's so much pressure on these kids, and just the fact that they could do this quickly has been pretty impressive. So I mean, I am, I've always, and we've talked about this for a long time, as the mental aspect, right? But I'm even more um encouraged, and then also I want to go deeper. I want to go deeper into it, because I feel like this is something that it's just not being taught either properly or at all.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the big miss with a lot of it, or at least from what I've seen, is like you and I've talked about the misunderstanding that there is a simple like switch to flip on, and this is more so what I've heard of some of the older athletes that I work with. But they, I'll have conversations with them, and they'll be like, "Yeah, I mean, I'm confident most of the time, but like, I just need like one little tip. Like, what if I make a mistake? Like, how do I bounce back?" And you're doing all the right things. It's not one thing; it's a consistent practice, and really what you're doing, and I think you mentioned it, right? You're rewiring those connections in the brain, and it's not that they're going to be all positive all the time. That's not the point. The point is that they can identify the negativity a little bit more objectively, and instead of thinking like that they don't identify with that, right? So it's not like I'm the mistake. It's just like this is a thing that happened, but we now know how to quickly move past it, and move on to focusing on the next thing. And the deal, just like everything, it's just practice. The more practice they get, the easier that'll be, the quicker that'll be. But I think too of some of the stuff we've talked about of guys in the major leagues at the very top, they still have those thoughts. So it's not like it's ever going to go away. It's going to be there, but it should be able to be. And in fact, they might get more of them, right? Because there's some more pressure if this is how you're feeding your family, and you have to get a contract to do this or that. There's more pressure there. So those thoughts are probably more prevalent, but it's just being able to manage them at that level.
Yeah, I tell them all the time is to embrace that feeling,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you know it's there now. You know it's there, and now you know that you have tools to do something about it.
Yeah.
And then also, I think the big component is the actual practice of it every day, right? And I think a lot of times is that's the huge miss with parents is you tell your kids something, but it's not just that one time, right? It's not just, okay, you need to quit whining, you need to quit getting down on yourself, you need to quit this, you need to quit that, but it's having the tools and then going back to them constantly. It's cognitive behavior therapy, right? It's not something that you practice one time and then all of a sudden, like you said, there's a switch that's flipped, and then all of a sudden they're positive, right? And they can deal with anything. It's practicing this every single day, and that's what needs to happen in baseball. Is it needs to be practiced every day, and that's why doing the homework after practice, because a lot of times if they go home, they get on their phones, they watch TV, they hang out, whatever, they're not really they're not really doing any of their homework. So I want to make sure that they're doing it at least when they're with me 3, 4, 5 days a week, that they're doing that homework, because a lot of times what happens is, we go through these mental performance programs, because I've had a lot of kids actually in the past that have done these online programs, but it hasn't worked. And the reason why it hasn't worked is because they're not continuing with it, right? It's like they do the 6 weeks or 4 weeks or however long it is, and then they don't do it anymore. And I learned that through cognitive behavior therapy many, many, many years ago, is that it's a continuous practice, and I'm still doing it to this day. Like, I'm
Yeah.
still trying to capture those negative thoughts and replace them with positive thoughts, right? So
Yeah.
it's constantly going back to that.
And to provide a little bit of context for our millions of listeners, um, but when talking about homework, it's we came up with really it's confidence. So it's not even so much positivity. Positivity is a big part of it, but it's really coming up with confidence building strategies. And the homework is sitting down and actually going through these practices, and it's recalling the good events from the practice, the good events from the day, and it's sort of getting in the habit. So on that mental side of it, you're getting in the habit of not dwelling on the errors or the mistakes and thinking, maybe it was actually a horrible game, but they take a few minutes there to think, hey, I actually did some really badass stuff today. I had a great hit, I had a great inning, I had a great whatever. And then it's that of, yeah, the errors happened. That's okay. Yeah, we'll work on that. The coach will help us with that. But look at all this great stuff I did. And the repetition of that, that's what helps to build that mental toughness and that confidence. Like maybe the last thing to say, if people don't know about cognitive behavioral therapy, it's really just the idea that your thoughts influence your actions. So if I have certain thoughts before I go up the pitch, that will impact me physically. I mean, it's a fact, right? You can even reverse that, right? My behaviors will influence my thoughts as well. So it's kind of a two-way street there. But I
I'm
think too,
writing
going
about.
back to the pressure thing, yeah, going back to the pressure thing, I know you and I've talked about it, but like in my particular sport, I took decades off and got back to it, and then I realized that pressure, that's what I missed. It's like that's what I live for. That's what makes me feel alive. Is being in that moment where gotta perform. Right? And there's many times where I don't. I fail. I make a mistake. It doesn't work out, and it sucks. But it's like in that moment, that's where I realize, like, man, this is what it's about. It's about feeling this way and being in this position and doing something I love. So thank goodness there's this pressure.
Yeah, yeah. Brock gets nervous before every single game, every single practice. He's like me. He's very, uh, he's a nervous person, right?
Yeah,
And it's funny because when you get away from that, you learn how much you miss it.
yeah,
And like we've talked about this before, is I still struggle with, my ending in baseball and how it went. And I struggle with missing that so much. And it's funny because in the moment, you see the nervousness as, uh, you know, flight, like you just want to get away, right? But then as soon as it all ends, you miss it, man. Like I miss I miss throwing up before a game, you know, because it's funny because I see it in Brock because he throws up before some games and even some practices if he's nervous. But that's the thing is that pressure is what leads to the accomplishment, right? I mean, and
Yeah,
if you don't
yeah,
have that accomplishment in your life anymore, it's a missing thing. And I think a lot of us that play sports or played sports, um, we miss that, you know, and it's such a huge thing, and it's such a big part of our lives is that you miss it so much, and you don't realize it in the moment, but you definitely realize it later. Like that's what you missed, you know. And I see it like I get nervous before our games for for the kids, for the
oh yeah,
boys,
me,
right?
me too. And I'm
And
not coaching; I'm sitting on the sideline screaming insults.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. But I was gonna tell you, so you mentioned, you know, okay, I had a horrible game, but then you actually reflect on it and you see positive things that happen, good things that you did do. It's funny because that just happened this last weekend is we ended up winning the C bracket. So what happens in the tournaments that we play, if they're big enough, you have multiple brackets on Sunday. So you go into pool play on Saturday, and then on Sunday, based on your seating, you go into brackets, right? So if you have a bunch of teams, like we had 20 teams in our tournament for our age group, so you had an A bracket, a B bracket, and a C bracket, and we won the C bracket. So to me, of course, first thoughts come in is that's a failure. Like, yeah, we won the C bracket, but so what? We weren't in the A or B bracket. And so what happened was on Monday, so Sunday, the reason why we ended up in the C bracket was because on Saturday we made some mistakes. We lost 2 games, um, and we allowed too many runs, and so we ended up in the bottom bracket. And then we came back and then we won the bottom bracket, right? And then you're done there. So A, B, and C doesn't get to meet, right? It's just A bracket winner, B bracket winner, C bracket winner. That's basically how you end up because they don't have enough. Obviously, you don't have enough time with that many teams to come back, um, and have those 3 people meet, right? Those 3 teams meet. So on Saturday, you know, we made some mental mistakes. Sunday, we win the C bracket. I get home and, you know, I was proud of how they came back and played Sunday because they played very well on Sunday and they won the C bracket. But at the same time, I keep getting these thoughts of how, yeah, but it's the C bracket. You're the winner of the losers. Like that's, you know, that's kind of how I think of it, right? That's my negative thoughts. And so on Monday, you know, I was sick on Friday, no, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday started feeling a little bit better, but on Monday I was pretty drained. So I kind of rested a lot. I didn't work too much. Um, and I was reflecting on the past season. And then so I watched some videos from the tournament and I was watching them play on Saturday in these videos. And I started to realize how far we've come, like how far, you know, especially due to the, you know, the mental performance aspect. And that's kind of where my mind went to first, not just about they've gotten better physically and performance wise outside of mental aspect, but you look at how they were able to endure on Saturday and keep fighting, even though they were making some mistakes. And when I saw certain plays being made, certain pitchers that were able to go 3, 4 innings and do really well, it was like I was able to look back and say, you know what? I may have not ended up where I wanted us to end up, but at the end of the day, it was a very, very positive experience. And it was also it was a lot of progress from last season. And we're only talking about 4 months ago was last season, right? So that's a prime example of those negative thoughts coming in and not being maybe where I think we should be, but we're where we need to be. Like it's
Yeah,
exactly what we set out to do was progress through this fall and make sure that we're ready for spring, summer. And they're there. I mean, they're getting there, you know. I mean, it's so easy to let those negative thoughts come in and bring you down where it almost blinds you to all the good that happened, right? And it's funny because I was talking to my coaches about that on Tuesday, and they all agreed. It was like they all went home same way. It was like we were proud that we won. You know, we won the tournament, but it was in the C bracket. But at the same time, they have progressed so much, and that's all we can
Yeah.
ask for.
Yeah. And I think there's, we've talked about this a little bit, the idea of, let the Lord's will be done. So in thinking this idea of where we are today is exactly where we're supposed to be. And of course, there's a lot goes through that, right? If you're working on it, if you're progressing, if you're doing those types of things, then you just have to realize that where you are is exactly where the Lord wants you. And so you weren't supposed to win the A bracket, and that's fine. You weren't supposed to win the B bracket. You were supposed to win the C bracket, and you did. And then just being okay with that, right? Or maybe not even being okay, being thrilled with that, because that that's where you're supposed to be. Um, and then two, thinking about comparing it to last season and this season, like that's really the whole idea of this journaling and stuff is being able to look back, and it could be last season, this season, last week, this week, being able to look back and be like, man, like I've already said, but like looking at like all the great things that have happened, regardless of outcome. So that's the other part too, is we don't control who wins or loses, right? We can control the way our athletes play and think, and the way we lift them up and that type of stuff. But it's this journaling, this homework that we talk about. That is a record of all the awesomeness. And then so they look at that. If you have a bad tournament or a bad few tournaments, they pull that thing out and just look at the progressions they've made, and have the players do that as well. And that could kind of be that motivation, that confidence boosting. That's the purpose of having it.
Yeah, it's another thing that I just thought about was on Sundays when you end up in bracket play, if you win, you keep on going. If you lose, you go home. So last season, we had a lot of like, we're in the winner's bracket and we go in on Sunday, we lose the first game. Or let's say we win the first game, we lose the second game. So the mental capacity that these kids had compared to playing 3 games this last Sunday and winning all 3 and fighting through a lot of adversity on the Sunday too. There was a lot of like peaks and valleys on the Sunday, where pitchers were pitching really well, hitters weren't hitting, but then hitters come back and they have 1 big inning, 2 big innings, 3 big innings, right? And we end up winning the game. So seeing that too is like their capacity, the ability to get through the 3 games or the 4 games that you play on Sunday. That's a very tough situation, especially for young kids, but they're able to do that now. So that talks to the mental performance training as well. Is like they were able to fight through 3 games and win all 3 games on Sunday, which was not the case last season.
Now, have you noticed? I know you've had a couple of players, maybe it's one specifically, but would really, really get emotional, and that would be the thing of like, well, they just can't handle the emotions, and so you have to pull them out, and whatever the case may be. Any differences with that, or they still?
2 of my pitchers that went the whole game were those guys.
Really,
It was those
really?
guys, the guys that really, really, really would get down on themselves if they walked somebody. So there was one in particular on Sunday, first inning. We made a few errors. They scored 1 run, I think. And that situation would have brought that kid to tears last season. He threw the whole game. That was our last game on Sunday. He came back the second inning, and he was throwing well the first inning. The problem is in the past, that kid would have gotten so down on himself because of what the team did. It was uncontrollables, right? It wasn't him. It was his teammates that made a couple errors, and he may have walked maybe one. I don't really remember, but that kid would have not made it to the second inning. We would have had to put in a new pitcher the second inning, which by game 3 on Sunday, you're low on pitchers, very low on pitchers.
Would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he was able to complete the game, and we won the game. They came back. That kid would not have made it past the first inning last season. I promise you.
Wow. Wow. Do you ever talk to him, or maybe do you hear? Does he have any type of self-talk, or is anything there changed that's helping that? Have you noticed, or does it just seem to be just working on some of the stuff?
I think it's just doing the homework, man. And I think, like I talked to him and I talked to his dad, and we talked about it, man. And he's come, and I talked to him after the game. We got this big, it's a giant baseball, that they give you when you win the tournaments. And I gave it to him because of what he did. And I explained to him why he got that. And,
Yeah.
and I wanted him to realize, like, this is not something that you've ever been able to do. And now you can do it. And it was pretty cool. I think more than anything, it's just writing that stuff every single day is really starting to change, these kids' thought process.
Yeah, for sure. Have you started, or have you had any of them do the highlight videos we've talked about, where it's a 3 or 4 minute highlight video of themselves playing to watch either before or during, or still not implemented that yet?
No, we haven't implemented yet, just because we've been so focused on the homework and making sure they bring something like their binders, or now they have
Yeah.
notebook because they're done with the binders. But there's been so much
Oh, I
focus
was
on
going to ask that.
that.
Okay. Yeah, now, so for the notebook, do they just kind of copy down the same stuff into that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the
Okay.
same exact stuff. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. 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 Yeah, that's great to hear. You have not told me all of that. You randomly tagged me in Facebook posts. Um, but
Yeah. That's them doing
but thank you
their,
for that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
working,
That's good.
man. It's been really cool to watch. So,
Yeah. And the little things too, and I don't know if you're doing this or not, but um, like I've already said a couple of times, and maybe you're doing it, but the point is not like writing it is a big part, right? Because that is the idea of writing is the action, right? So they're getting these thoughts, they're performing an action through writing to get it down on paper. But I would say like maybe that's 60% of it. The other 40% is reviewing that.
yep.
So if you build it into like a pregame routine or something, and there's lots of stories of high level athletes that they sort of have that pregame in their head, to where story of this one guy always took the 20-minute shower, and that 20-minute shower is him recalling all of the great plays he's made in his career. And then that's like, this is the idea of the notebook, is going back and looking at it pre-game, and looking like all the progress this week, this month, and that type of stuff. Maybe they can have a visual imagery practice that's detailed enough where they can do that. But if not, that's the other part of the notebook is reviewing it as part of
Yeah.
a pregame routine.
We tell them all the time on their way home to make sure that they review what they wrote and go over it and constantly go back to that and look at it. But I think a pregame routine of looking at it would be good too. We haven't done that, but I make it very adamant that I want them to keep reviewing this and looking at it and making
Yeah.
sure that you're not just writing it down to write it down. You're reviewing this and you're going over it.
Good, good. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I think we are approaching like 50 minutes or so. Anything else you want to try to talk about here? I mean, there's a lot there. We could keep talking about that for the rest of the week, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
What do you think? So for them, what do you think is a next step? Do you see that just continuing to work on this repetition of the journaling and thinking and reflecting and those specific questions we have, just continuing that, or do you think they're ready for something
I
else?
think so. This season, we have, I can't remember if we played 5 or 4 tournaments so far. It's either one of those two. So we either have 4 or 5 tournaments left. So we have we go until the first weekend in November segment. Yeah, the first weekend in November. Um that's where we end. So I think sticking with this plan until then, and then in the off season we do something new. Not new, but something to build on that.
Yeah.
Um I definitely think they'll be ready to implement something different at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. I hope too what they learn from this is that this shouldn't be anything that ever ends. Hopefully it's something where they see the value, they feel the value, and maybe next season they play for a different team. I don't know. Maybe they move away and they can't play. But hopefully it's something that they understand the value and the simplicity, right? It's not hard to do. You just got to do it.
Yeah.
And it's something that they keep up and continue.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But I definitely want to revisit and, do another clinic at the end of the season, before the next season to, any more advanced techniques or something, that we can implement there.
Yeah. Well, and I would hope to, a lot of what we did is we looked at specific skills, and a lot of it is like process based goal setting, and you're working on those processes, and as they get better and improve and grow, as they mature more physically and emotionally, there should be different skills they're working on, right? So they should improve whatever the skill was last season, and now this season, maybe there's something new that takes them to that next level. And when I say something new, something on the physical side that takes them to the next level,
Yeah.
because we take those physical skills and build those processes into the mental performance framework.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Super. Well, Dylan, I think that's great. I think this is a great first podcast to get things kicked off. We've got injuries that we're talking about. Man, mental performance training. Wow. We're going to blow people's
It doesn't get
minds.
any better than this, Kyle. It doesn't get any
That's true.
better.
That's true. Super. All right. Anything else you're going to talk about before we wrap up here?
Good to go, man. I'm getting hungry.
Good. Good. Me too. Gotta eat to grow, right?
Yep. Yep.
All right, Dylan. Coach G, thanks for your time. It's a good conversation.
All right, brother. Talk soon.
All right, buddy. Later.
Later.